Hey guys, welcome back. We are talking today, this is Saxon Algebra 1/2. We are talking today lesson 84. We are in the third edition of that book. We are talking about formats for the addition rule and the properties of equality. So this is the way this works when we're solving equations. The opposite of adding is subtracting. So we're going to minus 5 from both sides. Minus 5 from both sides. Let's see if I can do this. There we go. Okay, so minus 5 from both sides. There we go. Because then this will cancel that out and that'll get that x by itself. And that's what we're trying to do. But what we do to one side, we have to do to the other side of the equal sign. So this means we have x equals 7 minus 5 is 2. Your answer is 2. All right, next one here. This is a two-stepper we've got to do. We need to the chunk with the variable we deal with last. So we want to move this guy over to the other side. So we're going to minus 1/2 from this side because that will cancel it out. It's the opposite. Positive 1/2, negative 1/2. Bam, those things cancel out. What we do to one side of the equal sign, we have to do to the other. Minus 1/2. Now, I can't actually do this right here, so we're going to do a little bit of side work. 3 over 4 minus 1/2. I need 8, and why I say I can't do that is because I need a common denominator. Multiply that by 2, multiply that by 2. I get 3 over 4 minus 2 over 4 gives me denominator of 4. 3 minus 2 is 1. So let's take all that information back over here. 2x equals, and now we know all this garbage is equal to 1/4. 1 over 4. Now, the opposite of multiply is divide, but if I divide this, I'm gonna have to divide that. I'm gonna get a wonky fraction. We've been dealing with complex fractions. We don't wanna do that. Instead, what you wanna do is multiply this whole thing by the reciprocal. Remember, the reciprocal is flipped around. This is over 1, right? We can turn anything into a fraction by putting it over 1. So the reciprocal is gonna be 1/2. That means this cancels out with this cancels out with this, and that x is all by itself. But what I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So we end up with, multiply straight across the top, we get 1, straight across the bottom, we get 8. So our answer is 1/8. That one was a little tricky with those fractions in there. Another way to do that, by the way, is, so what we had was 2x equals 1 over 4. 2x equals 1 over 4. Let me write it a little bit differently. 1 over 4, right? Well, we can turn anything into a fraction by putting it over 1. So fraction equals fraction, cross multiply. This times this gives me 8x. This times this gives me 1. To get that x by itself, I would divide both sides by 8. This cancels, and I'm left with x equals, and this isn't an even fraction for anything, so it's just 1/8. You would leave it like that. So there's two different ways of doing that. Let's look at this guy here. These two things are being multiplied here. The opposite of multiply is divide. So we're going to divide by -3. Cancels out, cancels out. What I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So x equals positive divided by a negative. I'm sorry, let's try that again. Negative divided by negative is positive, and 12 divided by 3 is 4. Okay? All right, so let's look at this guy here. Remember, we want to deal with the variable chunk, this chunk right here, last. So we're first going to deal with this guy. I need to move that over to the other side, and the way I do that is by doing the opposite. The opposite of adding is subtracting. So if I do that, that cancels out, but what I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So what I have here is -3x equals 6. I'm currently multiplying -3 times x. The opposite of multiply is divide. And that cancels out, that cancels out. X is all by itself, but what I do to one side, I have to do to the other. 6 divided by -3 is -2. -2. Okay, so circle that for you. All right, guys. So the properties of equality, this is great. If you do it to one side, you have to do it to the other, and that applies for if you're doing it with addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division. So for example 5, it says, what property of equality is used? Well, x minus 4, the opposite of subtracting, is adding. Plus 4 plus 4. That will cancel these guys out, and I get x equals 13. The property of equality used? Addition. That's it. Addition, property of equality. That's all you got to do. All right, guys, here are your practice problems. Go ahead and pause the video, do those, come on back. All right, guys, so for those practice problems here, I just had to move that B up there. So let's start with A. We want to get the chunk with the variable by itself. So in order to do that, we need to move this guy to the opposite side, or to the other side. The opposite of adding is subtracting. So we're going to -5 from both sides. That is the Subtraction property of equality. If we're talking properties of equalities, now you know. Negative 2x equals 9 minus 5, which gives me 4. I'm currently multiplying. The opposite of multiply is divide. This cancels out this, and I get x all by itself. But what I do to one side, the equality property of multiplication, negative 2. Positive divided by a negative is a negative. 4 divided by 2 is 2. All right, this is one with a fraction, so let's go ahead and do this. We're going to minus 1/2 from both sides, minus 1/2. All right, so we've got some, so these will cancel out because we want to get this chunk with the variable by itself, which means we need to move that over. Opposite of adding is subtracting. So I have some, fractions are always off to the side work, okay guys? So I have 3/8 minus 1/2. My common denominator is going to be 8, so I need to multiply this by 4, this by 4. So now I have 3/8 minus 4/8. Which gives me negative 1/8. All right, now make sure that you're subtracting in order here. If we're subtracting it, we need it to be subtracting from that. Don't flip those around. Okay, so we have now negative 3x equals negative 1/8. I like the idea of doing fraction equals fraction because then we can cross multiply. Turn that into a fraction. This times this is negative 1. This times this is negative 24x. All right, to get that x by itself, we're currently multiplying, and the opposite of multiply is divide. Divide by negative 24, divide by negative 24. This cancels out, this cancels out. Negative divided by a negative is a positive. 1/24 equals x. But the variable's on the opposite side, so when you rewrite that, you'll say x equals 1/24. I do want you to rewrite it so that it looks the right way. Which two properties justify the steps in A? So let's go back up here to A. The property that justifies this step is the subtraction property of equality. Then right here, it is the division property of equality. All right, so if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I will see you guys in class. Thanks so much.